The November wind howled outside our Toronto home, rattling the old windows and their frames. A man can get used to most anything, but the particular loneliness of a house waiting for someone who doesn't want to come home is a cold that seeps right into your bones. The clock on the mantelpiece, a wedding gift from her parents, struck midnight. Each chime was a little hammer against my skull. Finally, the familiar sound of her BMW pulling into the drive. The door opened and Lara swept in on a gust of frigid air, all performance and weary sighs. "David, honestly," she said, dropping her briefcase. "Marcus is a machine. I swear he thinks we don't need to sleep." She ran a hand through her hair, the picture of a corporate warrior back from the front lines. "I need a shower, so hot melts the day off me." I just nodded. A man knows when his words are no longer wanted. When I heard the water drumming upstairs, I walked to the kitchen. Her purse, a thing that cost more than my first car, was open on the granite countertop. I saw the silver tin of her migraine pills. A good husband would get them for her. So I reached inside. My fingers didn't find the tin. They found paper, thin and crinkled like a secret. I pulled it out. My heart didn't stop. It did something worse. It kept beating, slow and heavy, a drum in a funeral march. The receipt was from Levinas, a place in Yorkville where the wine list has more pages than most books. The timestamp was 9:47 p.m. 2 glasses of Dom Perignon, oysters Rockefeller for 2, and a dessert for 1 plate and 2 forks called the Lover's Trilogy. The world didn't tilt. It just broke, clean in two. There was the world I thought I lived in, and then there was the one that was real. The next morning, the sun was a pale, watery thing behind the gray November clouds. I sat at our kitchen table with a mug of coffee that might as well have been hot ash. I hadn't slept. A man doesn't sleep when he's learned his house is built on bad ground. I'd folded the receipt and put it in my wallet. It felt like a shard of glass in there, resting against my heart. Lara came down looking like $1 million, smelling of expensive soap and ambition. She moved with a quick, bright energy that the truly tired never have. I kept my face like a stone in a river, letting the current of her presence flow around me. I had to hear the lie again in the clear light of day. "Morning," I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. "How did the project go? You get all sorted?" She didn't look up from her phone, her thumb flicking across the screen. "A catastrophe," she said, her voice smooth as butter. The main server crashed just as we were finalizing the deck for the morning. Marcus nearly had a stroke. We were there for hours with IT, living on Tim Hortons coffee that tasted like burnt dirt and half a box of stale Timbits. I think I stared at the same slide for 3 hours straight. She built the lie right there in front of me, brick by brick. She made it sound real, with details a man could almost believe. But I saw the other truth. The champagne. The oysters. The dessert for her, too. The lie wasn't just a story she told. It was the air she breathed. And I was suffocating in it. I left her in the kitchen, scrolling through her perfect life, and went to my office. I closed the door, and the sound of her humming faded away. This room was the only true thing I had left. It wasn't much. A desk, a good chair, 3 monitors, and walls covered in the scribbled language of code. For 2 years, this was where I'd built my secret world. I sat and woke the main screen. A universe of my own creation bloomed in the dark. Lines of green and white text, flowing and logical. This was Nexus. It was a predictive analytics engine I'd built from the ground up, a thing of pure, cold reason. It could look at a mountain of chaotic information and find the one single truth hiding inside. It could predict the behavior of millions of people, could see a market crash coming weeks away. I'd pour my savings into it, every spare dollar that didn't go to the mortgage or Lara's expensive tastes. I'd pour my nights into it, those nights she thought I was just tinkering with a hobby. I told myself I was building it for us. A way out, a new beginning. A bitter taste filled my mouth. A man could build a machine to see the whole world's secrets and still not see the one sleeping in his own bed. My beautiful, logical machine was a monument to my own blindness. It was built to find the truth. And now, I knew what I had to use it for. The fury came on slow, not a hot flash, but a cold certainty. It settled deep in my gut. A man who deals in facts has a hard time with lies. It's like a puzzle with a piece that's been deliberately cut wrong. You can't ignore it. You have to find out why. My fingers move with a life of their own. I pulled up our joint bank accounts, our credit card statements. For years, I let Lara handle finances. She said it bored me, and she was right. But now I wasn't bored. I was a hunter on a digital trail. The pattern was there, hidden in plain sight, a snake in the grass. I'd been walking right past it for months. Small things, odd things. Uber rides not to her office in the financial district, but to a quiet, residential street in Rosedale lined with mansions. Purchases from a lingerie shop on Queen West that sold silks and lace I'd never had the pleasure of seeing. Then I found the big one. A recurring monthly charge from a private parking garage. The kind of place meant for people who don't want their cars seen. It was tucked away on a cobblestone alley I knew. I pulled up the address on a map. A cold dread, heavy as a wet blanket, settled on me. The garage was a 2-minute walk from the front door of Lou Venus. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was a well-oiled machine. A routine. A second life running on a hidden track. Paid for with my money and my trust. The betrayal wasn't a single shot. It was 1,000 little cuts. My mind was a whirlwind, pulling old memories out of the dark. 3 months ago, Lara had told me she was going on a solo work retreat. A reward from Marcus for a job well done. She needed to de-stress. She'd said, at a spa in Muskoka. I remember packing a bag for her, putting in her favorite book. I believed her. A man wants to believe. I went back to the Uber statements from that weekend. My heart was a fist in my chest. There it was, a ride from our house, straight to an address I didn't recognize. I typed it into a search bar. The result that came back made the air leave my lungs. The Serafina Hotel, not a spa in Muskoka. A 5-star hotel in Niagara-on-the-Lake, famous for its romantic getaway packages and its soundproof rooms. I needed something solid, something I could hold. I went to the hall closet, where we kept our winter coats. I remembered the one she wore that weekend. A big Canada Goose parka that made her look small and fragile. I reached into the deep pocket. My fingers, numb and cold, closed around a thin rectangle of plastic. I pulled it out. The elegant silver script gleamed under the hall light. The Serafina Hotel. It was real. The lie was real. The retreat was real. She just hadn't gone alone. It lay in my palm, a cold, dead piece of life I knew nothing about. It was a key to a door I had never known existed, and it had just locked me out forever. The man had a name. It had to be him. Marcus Thorne. The visionary. The genius. The man whose name was on Lara's lips more often than my own. I'd met him at a company Christmas party. He had a handshake that was all about power and eyes that sized you up and found you wanting in the space of a heartbeat. He moved through the world like he owned it. And men like that are used to taking whatever they want. I found his Instagram profile. It was a carefully crafted monument to success. Him laughing on a yacht on Lake Ontario. Him holding a trophy at some corporate awards night. Him showing off a watch that could feed a family for a year. It wasn't a life. It was an advertisement for one. I felt a deep, primal dislike for him. The kind a dog feels for a snake. I kept scrolling, driven by a need to see it all. To understand the world that had stolen my wife. And then I saw it. A photo from a charity gala 2 weeks back. Marcus stood in the front, smiling a predator's smile. But my eyes went past him, to the crowd in the background. And there, blurred but undeniable, was Lara. She wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking at him. It was a look I hadn't seen directed at me in a long, long time. It was admiration mixed with something more, something hungry. It was the look a person gives to the sun. In that blurry, accidental moment, I saw the truth of it. This wasn't just an affair. She worshipped him. He was everything she thought I wasn't, and that hurt more than the deceit. Seeing her face in that photo was like turning a key in a rusty lock. A memory I had buried came flooding back, sharp and ugly. A dinner party at a friend's house, maybe a month ago. We were all talking about work. Someone asked me about what I did. Before I could string two sentences together, Lara had cut in with a laugh that was as bright and sharp as broken glass. "Oh, David," she'd said, waving a hand dismissively. "He's my brilliant numbers guy. He lives in a little world of spreadsheets and charts. It's all very stable." She said the word stable like it was a disease. The table had laughed politely. I felt my neck get hot. Then, without missing a beat, she turned the conversation to her world, to him. "But Marcus," she'd said, and her whole body leaned forward with excitement. "He's on another level. He's a shark. He sees what he wants, and he just takes it. There's a beautiful fearlessness to it. It's the kind of ambition that changes the world." At the time, I'd swallowed my pride. I told myself she was just trying to impress our friends, that she didn't mean to sound so cruel. But I was a fool. A man knows contempt when he hears it. She wasn't just praising him. She was holding us up, side by side, for everyone to see. The brilliant shark and the stable, boring husband. She had passed her judgment on me long ago. I was just the last to hear the verdict. A man can only take so much hurt before it turns into something else. The grief was still there, a great, hollow space in my chest. But now, something else was growing beside it. A cold, clear curiosity. A professional instinct. Marcus Thorne wasn't just a man who had wrecked my home. He was a puzzle. And I was a man who solved puzzles for a living. His company, Thorne Marketing, was the talk of Bay Street. They had risen from nothing to a powerhouse in just a few years. Marcus was hailed as a genius, a visionary, but a thing that grows that fast often has rotten roots. Lara's words echoed in my mind. He sees what he wants and he just takes it. I wondered what exactly he had been taking. I pushed aside the photos and the receipts. I opened a new file on my computer. I started to do what I do best. I began to analyze Thorne Marketing. I used only public information, investor reports, press releases, market data. I wasn't looking for proof of an affair anymore. I was looking for the truth of the business. I worked for hours, the city lights coming on outside my window. I built charts. I ran regressions. I looked for patterns. And I found them. Things that didn't add up. The profit margins they claimed were nearly double the industry average. For a marketing firm, that's almost impossible. Their declared operating costs were strangely low, as if they were running a global firm out of a closet. My analyst brain was screaming. It was a feeling I get just before I find a lie buried in the numbers. The data was telling me a story, and it wasn't a story about genius. It was a story about a magic trick. The time had come. The puzzle of Marcus Thorne was too complex for simple tools. I needed the full power of Nexus. I took all the public data from Thorne Marketing, every number, every claim, every press release, and I fed it into the machine I had built, my secret weapon. I designed Nexus to think in a way a human can't. It doesn't get tired. It has no biases. It just follows the logic of the numbers to their final, brutal conclusion. It's a lie detector for money. I hit the run command and watched. The screen filled with cascading lines of text as the program went to work. It was cross-referencing everything, testing every claim against known benchmarks, searching for statistical impossibilities. It was a digital hound sniffing for a single drop of blood in a clean room. For a long minute, the system churned. Then, a small red flag appeared on the screen. Then another, and another. They multiplied like a virus. The final report loaded onto my screen, and the air went out of my lungs. It was worse than I thought. Nexus had flagged dozens of transactions. It had found evidence of inflated revenues and hidden liabilities. But the final conclusion was the real killer. It was written in cold, stark text at the bottom of the screen. 99.8% probability of systemic fraud. The report highlighted the core of the scheme. Large, regular payments were being siphoned out of Thorne Marketing and funneled into 3 unregistered shell corporations. Marcus wasn't just a shark. He was a thief operating on a massive scale. And I had just found his treasure map. The fraud was a fire. The affair was just the smoke. I worked through the night. The city outside my window silent and asleep. I was alone with the biggest, ugliest secret I had ever known. My target now was the three shell corporations Nexus had uncovered. They were the heart of the whole rotten enterprise. I dove into the deep, murky waters of corporate registries. Two of the companies were ghosts. They'd been set up using a service that promised complete anonymity. They were black holes, designed to make money disappear, without a warrant from the RCMP. There was no way to know who was behind them, but people make mistakes, especially arrogant people. They get sloppy. The third company, the third ghost, had a flaw. I dug into the online archives, scrolling back through years of digital paperwork, and I found it, a clerical error. When the company was first registered, someone had forgotten to list an anonymous agent. For 22 days before the error was fixed, a real name was attached to that ghost company, and the internet never truly forgets. My breath caught in my throat as I pulled up the archive document. The shell company was called LM Ventures. My eyes scanned down the page the name of the original registered agent, the name that was on the official legal document. It was her maiden name, Lara's. The world seemed to stop. It wasn't just his crime. It was their crime. She wasn't just his lover. She wasn't just covering for him. She was his partner. She had helped him build the very weapon he was using to steal millions. The betrayal was complete. It was absolute, and it was criminal. The sun came up, but my office was still dark. The only light was a glow from the screen, illuminating the name on the document. Lara's name. A criminal. A conspirator. The woman I had promised to love and honor. A man has a breaking point. I was there. I knew I couldn't do this alone. Marcus Thorne was a shark on Bay Street. He had money and power and lawyers who could chew up a man like me and spit out the bones. Lara had proven she was just as ruthless. To go against him alone would be suicide. I needed a shark of my own. I didn't look for a family lawyer from a billboard. I looked for a name that was only whispered in the towers of the financial district, a name that made other lawyers nervous. The name that came back was Evelyn Reed. She wasn't just a lawyer. She was a legend, a corporate killer who specialized in taking down giants. She didn't argue cases. She ended them before they began. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely dial a number. My voice, when I spoke to her assistant, was a dry rasp. "My name is David," I said, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. "I need to book an urgent consultation with Ms. Reed. I have information about a significant corporate fraud." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then a crisp, professional voice said, "Ms. Reed can see you this afternoon." The first piece was on the board. The game had begun. And I knew, with a terrible certainty, that it would not end until someone was destroyed. 2 days later, I was looking at Evelyn Reed through my computer screen. She sat in an office that overlooked the CN Tower, a queen on her throne. She hadn't said much. She had just listened, her eyes never leaving mine, as I laid out the whole ugly story. The receipt, the hotel key, the fraud, and finally, the document with Lara's name. I shared my screen and showed her the work Nexus had done. "Mr. David," she said finally, her voice as sharp and clean as a surgeon's scalpel, "you have been remarkably thorough. The software is formidable. Our first step is to secure this data and ensure they don't know we have it." Just then, the door in my office opened. My blood turned to ice. It was Lara. She was holding a mug, a bright smile on her face. "Thought you could use a coffee," she said. I minimized Evelyn Reed's face in a flash of pure adrenaline. My screen was once again just a harmless, confusing lines of code for my little numbers game. Lara walked in and set the mug down on my desk, glancing at the screen with a look of bored pity. "Still tinkering with your hobby?" she said, a little laugh in her voice. "You spend so much time on that thing. Don't get too lost in your numbers. Okay? The lawn needs mowing this weekend." She smiled again, a wife being thoughtful. Then she turned and walked out, closing the door behind her. She had no idea she had just walked into the war room. She had no idea the woman she'd almost seen on my screen was the architect of her downfall. She had no idea that my little numbers game was about to burn her entire world to the ground. The close call left me with metallic taste of fear in my mouth. For the next few days, I lived on a knife's edge. Every conversation with Lara was a performance. I was a spy in my own home. My communications with Evelyn Reed were like passing secrets in wartime, encrypted, brief, and to the point. We were building a fortress of evidence, brick by silent brick. I was so deep in the darkness of it all, I almost missed the light. The email arrived on a Tuesday. It had been sitting in my inbox for a day, and the subject line was so simple I'd overlooked it. Nexus pitch. My heart hammered against my ribs. 6 months ago, in a fit of hope, I had sent a pitch for Nexus to a tech incubator in Lagos. A big one. The kind of place that finds unicorns and turns them into giants. I had never heard back. I had given up. I opened the email. It was from the lead investor herself, a legend in the tech world. The words on the screen seemed to glow. They had reviewed my proposal. They were exceptionally impressed. They wanted a live demonstration, as soon as possible. It was a lightning strike in a dark room. For a moment, all the ugliness with Lara and Marcus faded away. This was a dream, the real dream, not just the money, but the validation, the proof that I had built something that mattered. The thing that Lara had dismissed as a hobby, the little numbers game, was being courted by the best in the world. This wasn't just an opportunity. It was a lifeline, a path out of the wreckage of my life and into something new, a future that I would build myself on my own terms. My resolve hardened into something unbreakable. That night, the silence in the house was a living thing. It was heavy and suffocating. I couldn't bear it for one more second. I went to my wallet and took out the crinkled receipt from Lou Venus. It was time. I walked into our bedroom where Lara was reading a book. I didn't say a word. I just unfolded the receipt and placed it on the duvet in front of her. The quiet act was louder than a shout. She stared at it. Her face went through a storm of emotions in the space of a heartbeat. Confusion, recognition, panic, then the anger of the guilty. "What is this? Where did you get this?" she snapped. "You went to my purse? David, that is beyond pathetic. You're becoming so paranoid." I didn't rise to the bait. I just stood there, my silence a mirror reflecting her own guilt. The anger sputtered out and the dam broke. The tears came, great, heaving sobs. "I'm so sorry," she cried, the words muffled by her hands. "It was a mistake. A stupid, meaningless mistake. It didn't mean anything." She looked up at me, her face a mess of tears and desperation. "Marcus means nothing to me. He's just exciting. It was an escape. But it's over. I swear to you it's over." She pleaded. She bargained. She promised it would never happen again. She told me a story about a lonely, foolish woman who had made a terrible error in judgment. I listened to it all. I let her build this new lie on the ashes of the old one. I let her think it was just about an affair. I let her river of tears and apologies run its course. She cried about her foolishness, about the pressure of her job, about how she had taken our stable life for granted. She swore that Marcus was a symptom, not the cause, and that she would quit her job tomorrow, if that's what it took. She was painting a masterpiece of remorse. When she was finally done, her sobs reduced to quiet, hitching breaths, she looked at me with an expression of fragile hope. She was waiting for me to pull her close, to tell her it was okay, that we could fix this, that our marriage was stronger than this one meaningless mistake. I didn't move. I reached into the pocket of my housecoat and pulled out the other piece of paper, the one I had folded into a neat square. I unfolded it and slid it across the bed. It came to rest beside the restaurant receipt. It was the printout of the Shell Corporation's registration. Her maiden name was highlighted in a sickly yellow, glowing in the soft light of the bedroom lamp. She squinted at it, confused. Then her eyes found the name. The change was terrifying. The color vanished from her face, leaving it the color of old parchment. The hope in her eyes was extinguished, replaced by a deep, cold, animal terror. This wasn't about a broken heart anymore. This was about a broken law. I leaned forward. My voice was no louder than a whisper, but it was the coldest sound our bedroom had ever heard. "What about this, Lara?" I asked. Did this also mean nothing? She looked at me, her mouth agape, and in her eyes, I saw the confession she would never speak. She knew she was caught. She knew I had her, and she knew it was over. The woman I had known was gone. In her place was a cornered animal. Lara scrambled off the bed, stumbling backward, her eyes still locked on the document on the bed. The mask of the grieving wife was gone, and all that was left was raw panic. She fled the room without a word. I heard her run down the hall and slam the door to the guest room. A moment later, I heard the frantic, muffled tones of her voice. She was on the phone. I walked to the bedroom door and stood in the shadows of the hallway, listening. "He knows," she whispered, her voice a ragged, desperate thing. "Marcus, he knows everything. The company, LM Ventures, he had a printout with my name on it." There was a pause. I could hear the faint, arrogant buzz of his voice through the phone. Even from a distance, it dripped with condescension. He was probably telling her to relax. "No, you don't get it," she cried, her voice cracking. "He's not stupid. He knows." Then I heard his voice clearly, a shard of ice in the quiet house. She must have put him on speaker. "He's a nobody, Lara. A Tim Hortons kind of guy in a Dom Perignon world. What's it going to do? He has nothing. Deny it. Tell him he's crazy. He can't prove a damn thing. A Tim Hortons kind of guy. That's all I was to them. Predictable. Harmless. Safe. The rage that filled me was so cold and pure it felt like peace. They thought this was a game they could win with lies and arrogance. They had no idea I had already changed all the rules. The next morning, I was on a plane flying over the Atlantic. The gray sprawl of Toronto disappearing beneath the clouds. I was leaving a war zone behind me, but I was flying toward my future. My focus was absolute. Nexus, the tech incubator in Lagos, was a world away from the cold, quiet deceit of my home. It was a place of glass and steel and brilliant minds, buzzing with the energy of creation. I walked into the main boardroom, and for the first time in months, I felt like myself. I didn't give a pitch. I gave a demonstration of power. I showed them what Nexus could do, how it could think, how it could find the one rotten number in a stack of 1,000,000 good ones. I ran a live test on a dataset, so complex it would have taken a team of auditors a month to untangle. Nexus solved it in 90 seconds. The room was silent. The lead investor, a woman with eyes that could see the future, leaned back in her chair and a slow, wide smile spread across her face. "Mr. David," she said, "you haven't built a program. You have built a weapon." The offer they made me was beyond my wildest dreams. It wasn't just funding. It was a full partnership. They wanted to build a global empire around Nexus, and they wanted me to be its king. Before I left the building, their PR team had already written the press release. That night, back in my hotel, an alert popped up on my phone. A major Nigerian tech journal, the kind that gets read by investors and CEOs all over the world, had just published a feature story. The headline read, "The quiet analyst who built a multi-million-dollar fraud-hunting weapon." And right below it was my picture. The story hit the internet like a shockwave. I watched from my hotel room in Lagos as the world found out what I had been doing in my little basement office. The article was shared across LinkedIn, Twitter, and the private chat groups of the financial elite. My name, which had been invisible for my entire career, was suddenly everywhere. Back in Toronto, that shockwave was tsunami. Lara's phone must have been melting. All her friends, the ones from her elite circle, the ones who had politely smiled when she called my job boring, were seeing the news. They weren't just seeing that I was successful. They were seeing that I was powerful in the exact same world of money and influence that they worshipped. "Lara, is this David?" I had no idea. "Why did you keep this a secret?" "A multi-million-dollar valuation? He's a genius." Her entire social standing was built on a lie. The lie that she was a brilliant, ambitious one, and I was her simple, stable, background husband. That lie had just been nuked from orbit. The humiliation had to be a physical thing, a crushing weight. She hadn't just cheated on her husband. She had cheated on a man who was now, by every measure she valued, more successful and more important than she could ever hope to be. The power dynamic she had so carefully maintained had not just been flipped, it had been annihilated. She was no longer the star. She was the fool who had betrayed the star. And everyone she knew was watching. For Marcus Thorne, the article wasn't about social humiliation. It was an existential threat. He wouldn't have cared about my picture. He would have cared about 3 words: fraud-hunting weapon. He would have read those words and felt the cold hand of doom on his shoulder. The arrogant dismissal, the Tim Hortons kind of guy, all would have vanished in a flash of pure, primal fear. He would have realized in an instant that his lover's quiet, boring husband wasn't just a threat. He was the executioner. I had the tool that could prove everything. His reaction was exactly what a cornered animal's would be: blind panic. He started trying to cover his tracks, but all he did was make more noise. He demanded that IT wipe servers, creating a digital footprint of obstruction. He began shredding boxes of documents, an act so cliché and so guilty, it was almost laughable. He started moving money between his shell companies, a flurry of activity that would set off red flags at every bank involved. He was a man drowning, and in his thrashing, he was only pulling himself under faster. He thought he was destroying the evidence. But a man like Marcus doesn't understand data. You can't just delete the truth. Every action he took was creating a new data point, a new piece of evidence for the story of his guilt. His arrogance had been his shield for his entire life. But now, it was the very thing that was making the target on his back bigger and brighter. He was running from a ghost, and he had no idea the ghost was watching his every move. Marcus was playing checkers in a hurricane. Evelyn Reed was playing chess in a soundproof room. She saw his panic for what it was, an opportunity. "Let the guilty man show you his guilt," she told me. "He'll do our work for us." While he was shredding and deleting, she was preparing the kill shot. We didn't go to the press. We didn't go to the police. That would have been messy and unpredictable. Evelyn Reed did not do messy. She took the Nexus dossier, a clean, brutal summary of the entire fraud, complete with timelines, transaction IDs, and the undeniable link to Lara's shell company, and had it professionally bound into several sleek, black folders. They looked like annual reports. Then she had them delivered by a private, bonded courier, not to the authorities, but to the 3 groups of people Marcus Thorne feared more than the law: the independent members of his company's board of directors, the private equity firm that was his largest investor, and the senior partners at the accounting firm that signed off on his books. Inside each folder was a single and signed cover sheet. It contained only 8 words. "We felt you had a right to know." It was a declaration of war delivered as a whisper. We hadn't made a public accusation. We had simply given the sharks the scent of blood in the water and armed them with the map to the body. The rest, she assured me, would be a feeding frenzy. The feeding frenzy began less than 12 hours after the dossiers were delivered. The board of directors of Thorne Marketing called an emergency meeting. The investors were on the phone, their voices cold with fury. They weren't just angry about the fraud. They were furious that they had been made to look like fools. Marcus was summoned. He must have walked into that boardroom expecting to lie his way out of it, like he always had. But he wasn't met with questions. He was met with conclusions. He was suspended immediately, his corporate accounts frozen, his access to everything he had built cut off in a single vote. He was escorted from his own office like a common criminal. The fallout hit Lara just as hard. The forensic accountants the board hired took less than an hour to trace the money flowing into LM Ventures. Her name was now officially linked to the conspiracy. She got a call from Human Resources. She was suspended indefinitely. Her company laptop was remotely wiped. Her access was revoked. In the space of one business day, they had gone from the king and queen of their own little empire to powerless, unemployed suspects. Their power hadn't been taken in a fight. It had been turned off. A switch had been flipped. The machine they had built to enrich themselves had been dismantled with a quiet phone call and a single, damning report. They were cast out, left with nothing but the silence and the coming storm. I came back to Toronto and walked into a house that was no longer a home. It was just a collection of things we had bought together, all of them now tainted. I was packing a bag, planning to stay at a hotel, when the doorbell rang. It was Lara. The transformation was absolute. The confident, powerful woman was gone. In her place was a ghost. She was pale and thin, and the fear in her eyes was a raw, naked thing. She started talking before I could close the door, the words spilling out of her. She was sorry. It was all her fault. She had been foolish and weak, and she had let Marcus poison her mind. She begged me to forgive her, to give her one more chance. She cried about our past, about the life we were supposed to have. It was a good performance. The tears were real. But I had spent years analyzing data, looking for the truth beneath the surface. And I could see the truth in her eyes. This wasn't the plea of a remorseful wife. It was the desperate bargaining of a co-conspirator. She wasn't afraid of losing me. She was afraid of what I knew. She was terrified that I would be the star witness at her trial. Her tears weren't for our lost love. They were for her lost future. She wasn't begging for my heart. She was begging for my silence. And watching her, stripped of all her power and pride, using love as her very last weapon, I felt the final embers of my old affection for her turn to cold, hard ash. I looked at the woman crying on my porch, and I saw a stranger. The person I had loved was an illusion, a story she had told me. This person, the desperate, terrified one, was real, and I wanted nothing to do with her. The marriage is over, Lara, I said. My voice was quiet, but it was as final as a gravestone. My lawyer filed the divorce papers this morning. Her face crumbled. This was it. The final door slamming shut. But I wasn't there to twist a knife. Evelyn Reed. And I had planned this final move carefully. It was not about revenge. It was about freedom. My freedom. I'm not a vengeful man, I said, and it was the truth. I have no desire to see you in prison. What you and Marcus did, that's for the law to decide. My only concern is cutting this last tie between us, cleanly and forever. I made her the offer, the only offer she would get. I would not volunteer to speak to prosecutors. I would not provide them with any more of my research than what the board already had. In exchange, she would sign the divorce papers without contest. She would walk away with her personal belongings and nothing more. No claim on my assets. No claim on my future earnings. And absolutely no claim on Nexus Analytics. It was not a negotiation. It was a choice. She could fight me in court, a long, ugly battle where all her crimes would be laid bare. Or she could sign the paper, take her chances with the law, and disappear from my life. It wasn't mercy. It was a business decision, an end to a failed partnership. 6 months passed. The seasons turned. The divorce was a quiet signature on a piece of paper. The legal storm around Marcus and Lara raged on in the newspapers, a messy, public affair that I no longer read about. It was their world, not mine. My world was Nexus Analytics. Our office, high in a glass tower overlooking the lake, was a place of light and energy. We had grown. We were hiring the brightest minds I could find. And I discovered something about myself. I was a good leader. I listened. I encouraged. I built a place where people felt safe to be brilliant. I was no longer the quiet man who sat in the background. My voice had weight now. My shoulders were broader. The hollow space in my chest had been filled, not with anger, but with purpose. One afternoon, I was working with a young intern, a woman fresh out of the University of Toronto. She was smart as a whip, but terrified of making mistakes. I remembered Lara's voice, dripping with contempt for my stable job, and I felt a protective instinct rise in me. The only mistake is not asking a question, I told her, pointing to her screen. Your idea is good. Trust it. She looked up at me, and the relief and gratitude in her eyes was worth more than any stock valuation. I wasn't just building a company. I was building the kind of place where I would have wanted to work. A place built on respect, not fear. A foundation for a life that was finally, truly my own. I was at a cafe in the Distillery District, the late afternoon sun warm on my face. The old brick buildings around me were a reminder that things built on a solid foundation can last. On the table in front of me was a contract, the last page of a deal that would take Nexus global. I picked up a pen, the weight of it feeling good in my hand, and signed my name. A new chapter. As I closed the folder, I glanced up across the cobblestone street. A woman was walking out of a law office. She was alone. She looked tired. The expensive coat she wore seemed too big for her now, a costume from a life she no longer lived. It was Lara. For a second, our eyes met across the distance. I saw a flicker of something in her expression. Not anger, but a deep, weary recognition. Then she looked away, pulling her coat tight against a chill that wasn't in the air, and hurried down the street until she was lost in the crowd. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel pity. I felt quiet. It was over. A story had ended. I took a sip of my coffee. It tasted clean and strong. I turned my attention back to the papers in front of me, to the future I had built not on the ashes of revenge, but on the simple, unshakable power of the truth.